and welcome. My cat is already here. I don't know if you can even see her little shark fin tail. Let's see. Already here. Hey, Dax. Alright, anyway, so today we're going to be talking about intros, and I'm going to be giving some tips on intros. I get questions about intros a lot, especially on my intro videos, because I always vlog the intro process, or at least the beginning of it, because sometimes they go on a really long time. So it's just like I get tired of filming it because nothing's really happening. I'm just kind of waiting around to see what's going to happen, and it's like, it's, you know, content wise it can get a little boring. But I do a lot of intros, and because of that, because I film it a lot, I get questions about them. And I've never done a video like this because, to be quite frank, I don't feel like I'm very good at intros. And some of that's probably my imposter syndrome when it comes to my rat care, because I'm that kind of person who has imposter syndrome with my rat care, even though I know I take good care of them. And I have a channel, a whole ass channel about how I take care of them. So it's a prison of my own making. But anyway, I decided to go ahead and do this because it occurred to me finally that I do have some like little tricks that I do with my intros, and I do intros like sometimes up to 6 times a year. And if that doesn't qualify me, at least to some degree, to give advice, then I don't know what I'm doing here. So let's get into it. Now, first off, the kind of intros that I do are the carrier method intros, and I'll go ahead and pause here to kind of show you what that means. Okay, so the carrier method is the method of intros where you start rats out in a small cage and you slowly progress them up until they're in their big cage. So for me, this is stage 1 intros. This is a carrier that PetSmart used to sell. I don't think they do anymore. It was labeled as a carrier cage. So like, they did think that a hamster could actually live in this thing, but they couldn't. This is like 12 inches this way. I don't know, 9 inches this way, something like that. But yeah, and it works really well for me. I don't know if you can still get this. Ignore the kitten. Hi. My second stage is this cage. This was also an old model of PetSmart cage. I don't think they make this anymore either. But you can get that one, which is the KT My First Home, or My Rat's First Home, something like that. And it's basically the same kind of cage. And then when they do well in this, I put a hammock in it, which we'll talk about a lot more in a little bit. And then once they progress from this, they go into my Preview 528, I think is what it is. And this cage is about twice the size. So like basically this cage is about twice the size of this cage, and this is about twice the size of the little blue cage. And once they're done with that cage, I put them in a single story, which isn't quite twice the size of the Preview, but you know, it's close. And then they finally will go into a double. They'll be fairly empty. I will just put enough in to make sure that they don't fall and hurt themselves. And then I'll slowly add their stuff over the course of a few days. And you're such a tiny menace. Anyway, I hope that helps you understand the carrier method at least a little bit. You can also go watch my old, let me just fix that so you can't do that. You can also go watch my old intro videos to get a better idea of what I'm talking about. Now, with the carrier method, the thing to keep in mind is the most common and most recommended type of intro. However, it is not always going to be the best kind of intro for your rats. So the thing with rats is they are not a one-size-fits-all kind of pet. Some things that work for some rats aren't going to work for other rats. Like sometimes you get the most common, most recommended advice and you try it with your rats and it just doesn't work. And that is one of the lovely frustrating things about having pet rats. So if the carrier method just is not working for you, the one I would recommend next would be neutral space, which is where you take them to a space that doesn't smell like either rat. So like if you free roam them in a room, then take them to a different room. If you free roam them in a bathroom, maybe free roam them on your bed, that kind of thing. And just like let them get used to each other that way. And as they gradually become more used to each other and more okay with each other, you can then hopefully transition into the carrier method. But there's also a very good chance you're just going to have to keep up the neutral space method, maybe scent swapping, that kind of thing, and eventually just try them in a cage together and hope for the best. Now, another thing is intros take as long as intros take. Sometimes you can be done in a couple of days. Like with my dwarf group, they were pretty much done with intros within, I think, 3 days. I still like went fairly slow. I didn't like just give them a full cage just because I've had a lot of bad intro experiences, so I didn't want to push it. But they were basically done with intros in 3 days, and they're a pretty harmonious group. The only real problem child is Mystic. She is a grump, but she's not aggressive. She's just grumpy. And the longest it has taken me is this group so far, because technically they still do not have all the things that I would normally give them. There's one hide I haven't put in there because it's that hide that has always set Thistle off, so I haven't given it to them, and I probably will soon because I need to know if she can have it at all or if it just needs to be completely removed from the cage. But yeah, this group took me months. It took me months to do intros with this group. They've been living together for about 5.5 months now, and I would say 3 months. It took me 3 months before I felt like they were going to be okay. So sometimes it's just like that. So anyway, if you can't do carrier method, my next recommendation would be neutral space. Now for the carrier method, let's go into some like finer points, some tricks, that kind of stuff that I do with my rats, because if you're not new to intros, there are a lot of things you can look out for. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is body language. It is very, very important for you to understand your rat's body language. And if you have an understanding of body language with other animals, it can be a little bit more intuitive for you with your rats. Now, obviously, not all animals are going to have the same body language, but if you get used to reading body language, it is extremely beneficial. So with rats, the main thing with body language is posturing. So basically, some things to keep an eye on is if they get extremely puffy, this is called proliferation. If they get extremely puffy, that is a sign that they are agitated. Bruxing and boggling can also be a stress sign, but if they are boxing, that's when two rats stand on their back feet and they kind of like push at each other with their hands. That's called boxing. If they're doing that and chattering their teeth, which will look like bruxing or boxing, but it is slightly different, and they're chattering into their teeth, that is a bad sign. That means that they're about to start an actual fight, and you do want to separate them if possible, or try and de-escalate the situation. Boxing's not always that big of a deal. In intros, it can be more concerning because boxing is basically just them posturing at each other, being like, I don't know if I want you to dominate me right now. I kind of think I'm in charge and you shouldn't be in charge. And it's like just reestablishing a quick pecking order. In intros, it can lead to a fight. It doesn't always, but sometimes it does. Pinning is generally a pretty safe thing. Sometimes it can turn into a fight, especially if the rat who's doing the pinning is puffy. If they are puffy and the other rat is not submitting, I personally will try to separate them, because that typically ends up with the rat who is on top kicking at them with their back feet and sometimes biting at them. Sidling is also not great. So that's when you have one rat here and another rat starts like scooting their butt into them. And this is them trying to basically it is them trying to start a fight. They're going like this because they want to kick at them with their legs and get them on their back. And again, during intros, this is a bad thing. If you have an established group and you see your rats doing some of these behaviors, it's not typically something you need to worry about. The puffiness is the biggest sign that someone is deeply irritated and they are going to start a fight, and so is chattering their teeth while boxing and or pinning another rat. Now, the thing you're going to hear people tell you is that you just have to let them work it out. And to an extent, that is absolutely true. They have to establish their own hierarchy. They have to figure out who's in charge. And you cannot interfere too much, because the more you interfere, the more you're interrupting that natural process. So with the body language, those are the instances where I would separate them. I wouldn't necessarily separate them if they're power grooming, and that's when a rat is holding another rat down and like using their teeth to groom one of them, usually on the shoulders. It's typically where you'll see them power grooming. That I let go. Pinning is a very useful tool in rat hierarchy. So for example, just the other day, Lamb's kind of been on one with the group I'm still in the middle of intros with in the living room. And she was just kind of being a bully, just a little bit of a bully. And Blooper got tired of her shit, basically. So I heard this loud squeak and I went over to see what was going on because I thought Lamb was going to be attacking someone. And instead what I found was Blooper, not puffy, not chattering teeth, not even really angry, just holding Lamb down. And Lamb was squeaking and kicking her back legs, very unhappy, and Blooper just was holding her. And she held her until Lamb submitted. And that is Blooper saying, you are not in charge, I am in charge. Blooper is absolutely the alpha of that cage, and she's a pretty good alpha. And she was done with Lamb picking on the others, because Lamb wasn't really picking on Blooper, she was picking on everyone else. And she was done. So I let them work it out. I stood there, made sure nothing bad happened, but I just let them work it out. And it can be a little hard to know when you should interfere. Just use your instincts. If they don't seem angry based on what I've described with their body language, just let them work it out. Because they have to also learn how to de-escalate these situations themselves. Because you're not always going to be there. You're not always going to be there to break it up. You're not always going to be in the room or the house. They need to learn how to deal with these situations themselves. Because a harmonious group isn't one that never fights. It's one that works through it and then doesn't hurt each other while they're working through it. Another thing you'll probably hear some people say is no blood, no foul. I don't agree with that rule because you can absolutely stop a fight before it gets to a point where someone is hurt. I absolutely will stop a fight. I do not let them work it out if they are fighting. So if it looks like a rat ball is about to happen, I go in and I separate them. I will pull out the aggressor. I will depoof them. That's basically where I hold them on my chest. And I just run my hand down them until they depoof. And that's basically me telling them that I'm in charge and they need to cool it. And that is a trick you can do sometimes. It doesn't always work. Sometimes you do that, you put them back in and they immediately get angry again. But that is something you can sometimes do. So as I said earlier, once you're in a big enough cage, you can give them a hammock. And this in general changes the vibe of the intro for me 100%. My rats are so happy when they get a hammock. It's like they have a reason to live again, and they immediately get into it. They immediately start cuddling each other. And the thing with the hammock is that it can promote cuddling because everyone wants in that hammock. So especially if you have rats that aren't fighting but they aren't cuddling and they're in like second stage intros, giving them a hammock can help promote them into cuddling. And that is the most important thing. Is like you'll hear a lot of people say once they are consistently cuddling, that's when you can move them up a stage. That's not always the case. I have had instances where they will cuddle and then when they wake up and they go to the bottom, they fight. I don't know why, but in general, consistent cuddling is the key that you can move them up a stage. So yes, giving them a hammock works really well. I suggest a flat hammock or a, what's it called? What are these ones called? This style of hammock, I can't remember what it's called. Bunk bed? A bunk bed hammock? Something where they can't get trapped in it. I wouldn't do a tube hammock. I wouldn't do a cube hammock. It needs to be something that has that's either completely open or has multiple openings so that if a fight does break out, they can just get out without it escalating into them feeling trapped and escalating the fight because of that as well. Because the thing with rats is if they feel trapped, they are a lot more likely to fight each other. All right, so a tip I can give you. If you have female rats and they are just picking at each other and they're not hurting each other, but they're just not getting along, sometimes if you just wait out a heat cycle, it fixes everything. Thistle, are you bullying Baker? Yeah, go in there, Ursula, break it up. Don't let her be mean. I was just talking about how difficult Thistle is too. He probably has a treat that she wants. That sounds like protest squeaks, not like I'm in danger squeaks. And you will learn the difference at some point. Oh, I think, yeah, Thistle came out with something and now Ursula's in there and he's still squeaking. So he has a treat that they want. Anyway. Heat cycles, that's what I was talking about. If you have female rats, so the thing with female rats is they go into heat every 3 to 5 days, just depending on the rat. And much like you can expect, their hormones will fluctuate during this time. And the thing is, the female rats will hump each other when they are in heat. And this just like breaks up the tension a lot of the time. And I have had it, like specifically I'm thinking of my rat Pilot. When I was introducing her to Rook and Rowley. It was her, Button Bright, Rook, and Rowley, and an older girl named Clover. And Pilot was just on a tear. She was so angry. She was so mad that I was daring to introduce her to these rats. And then Rook and Rowley each went through a heat cycle. I assume Pilot and Button Bright did too. And all of a sudden, she was fine. She was like, yeah, I'm cool with these guys. I don't care anymore. And I was just sitting there like, you've been stressing me out for 5 days. What the hell? And she was like, no, I'm good. And so like every time you move them up a stage, if they start having issues with, especially if it's with a certain rat, just wait out the heat cycle and see if that kind of fixes it. A lot of the time it does, but it's not a guarantee. So another issue that comes up a lot is food. A lot of people say rats cannot be food aggressive, but that is not the case. They absolutely can be food aggressive. And so if you feed from a bowl, that is typically what the issue is, but not always. I'll get into that in a second. But if you feed from a bowl, a lot of times they become aggressive and territorial over the bowl. So it's recommended to scatter feed, and that just means you take all the food and you just sprinkle it throughout the cage. And that typically will help a rat that has food aggression learn not to have that issue. And it also promotes them having to like move around each other to eat. And because a rat will just kind of eat whatever's there when they're scatter fed, it has the benefit of not having a single rat hoard all the treats. However, as I said earlier, rats are not a one-size-fit-all pet. So, for example, my rats that are in the living room are currently being fed in a bowl, which I do hate. But when I first got them into the big cage, food was like a real issue for Suitor. She was going after them hard. And I was scatter feeding them, specifically at night, hours after I'd fed them, when they woke up and decided to go finish off whatever they hadn't eaten yet. She was causing a lot of fights when she saw someone else was eating, and I had to make a decision to feed them in the bowl, and that stopped the fighting. And I will eventually get them back to being scatter fed because that was my preferred method of feeding, but it was a necessary thing for me to start feeding them in the bowl to mitigate Suitor's aggression. And I don't know why she was so angry when she found them eating like at the bottom or in one of the shelves, but not at the bowl. It's weird. But if you're having issues with them and food and you scatter feed, try a bowl. If you're having issues with them and food and you feed in a bowl, try scatter feeding. Just switch it up and see if it helps. Another thing people wonder often is it okay to take them out and cuddle them? A lot of people say no. Most people say no. I do not follow the rules on this. I don't like spend an hour cuddling them a day in intros, but I will take them out at least once a day to check them over, make sure they aren't hurt or anything, make sure that they're, okay, that their body condition's okay, make sure their eyes are like bright and alert, and I will cuddle them. And my rats in particular are used to a certain degree of attention from me. And if they don't get that attention, it really affects them. It really negatively affects them and their mood. And I can tell because like when I pull them out and I cuddle them, they just seem so much happier. And then they seem better when I put them back. Now, the thing is, people say you shouldn't do this because you want them to really bond and they need to just bond with each other. But I also feel like to a certain extent, they need to understand that you're still there for them, because some rats have jealousy issues and some rats just need a lot of attention. A lot of my rats need a lot of attention, and they feel they can fall into a depression if they're not getting the attention that they're used to. So like, while you can't do like what you would normally do 100%, I do. Can you guys leave him alone? Let him eat in peace. I do think it's fine to take them out for just like a quick 2-minute cuddle session and put them back, as long as you do it with all the rats individually. Just put them back and let them continue to bond. Again, it's not necessarily a recommended thing, but I do that. The next thing is free roam. People will say also that you shouldn't free roam them until they're completely done with intros. And again, I don't necessarily think this is 100% accurate, because again, like, these guys took me 3 months to figure out completely that they were going to be okay. I was not going to not free roam them for 3 months. So I generally, what I'll do is I won't free roam them until they're in at least the preview. So they have to get through first and second stage intros, and sometimes I won't even do the preview. I'll wait until they're in half accreditation, depending on how well they're bonded. And when I do free run them, I start at like 10 minutes. I give them 10 minutes to run around, burn off some of that energy, burn off some of that boredom, and then I put them back and I monitor them very closely the entire time. And the reason I do free roam them is because rats get very stressed in intros and they need something to just like break up the monotony of them. And I feel like the energy they burn off is very good. Also, I need to know that they're going to be okay in free roam. I have multiple groups. I have the same territory for everyone. So basically my free roam territory has become neutral territory because it smells like freaking everybody. Rats that they'll never meet, it smells like. If you have a small group or just one group, I would suggest, if you want to do a little free roam, doing it in a space that they are not familiar with. So like, again, if you have a room, do it on your bed. If you free roam them in the bathroom, you can do it on your bed, or just like somewhere that they're not used to. Like if you free roam them in your bedroom, maybe the couch, that kind of thing. And again, I go very limited time. It's like 10 minutes, and then if they do well with that for a few days, I will bump it up to 15 minutes. And once they are in their full cage, I typically go ahead and do the full free roam. But I don't do it for the first several days. Usually like first up to 5 days, I do not free roam. But I will free roam while they're in intros. Now this next tip is for the anxious among us. I'm one of them, which is don't hover. I am a helicopter parent when it comes to my rats. I'm there. I hover, I monitor, I just like stand over them staring, and I have to not do that. And here's the reason why. One, it's distracting for them. And this is one of the frustrating things for me with free roams, is sometimes, because like they're in a little cage, they're not in their normal environment, and people get curious, so they go up and they want to say hi to them and stuff. And the thing is, I try to leave them alone when they're in the cage for like the most part. Like obviously I'm going to feed them, that's going to interrupt their cuddling and stuff like that. But if I'm not actively doing something with them, I leave them completely alone. And the reason for that is because I want them to relax. I want them to sleep. I want them to cuddle. I want them to groom each other. And they're not going to do that if I'm right there, because they want out of the cage, they want attention, they want treats. And so oftentimes, when I'm free roaming and someone like approaches them and starts talking to them and wakes them all up, I have to just be like, you need to leave them alone. You just need to leave them alone so that they will bond. And it's hard because it's a pile of cute rats. I get it. And they're stressed. And no one likes that. But it is necessary. And the other, please, leave him be. Oh, this one's Kelpie. He must have pissed them off because they're all pinning him. Are you gonna groom him? Oh my god, kittens. The hazards of filming with animals around. The other reason I choose not to hover is because I'm a very anxious person. And rats, believe it or not, can sense this. And I found, especially with this last intro, that my anxiety, the closer I was to the cage, the more it kind of leaked into them. They were responding to me and my anxiety. So like for that cage, whenever I did anything, I literally stood in the hallway and watched them from across the room, because I found that when I wasn't actively the one monitoring them, they did a lot better. So like they spent several nights in Cappy's room, and they spent several days in Cappy's room as well. And I just kind of let her monitor them and let her take care of them. I have the benefit that Cappy also knows rats really well. She can kind of read their body language. She knows what to look for. So I just let her deal with them, and they did a lot better with her monitoring them than with me monitoring them. This was after Suitor decided she didn't actually want to be friends with them and started attacking them. And my anxiety was through the roof at that point. And so Cappy just had to deal with it for like a week. and it worked pretty well. So like if you're a particularly anxious person or you get stressed during intros, I would suggest when you put them in a new cage, just step back. You don't have to leave the room. I definitely wouldn't recommend that. But just kind of step back and watch them with a little bit of distance so they're not like keying into your anxiety as much as you are. Now this next tip I have, this trick I do, I don't know if other people do it. It works really well for me. I've done it for years. You can't mess with that. Which is implementing a timeout cage, basically. So if you get to a point in intros where you're kind of stuck, where they get along perfectly fine in one cage, but every single time you move them up to the next stage, they start fighting. And it's like you can't find a balance because they're perfectly fine in this cage or this stage and they're not in this one. Provided it's not like the first two stages. We're talking about more like when you're trying to get them into the big cage and they're just not doing well in the big cage, but in the outside of the big cage, they're absolutely fine. Something I do is I take one of the smaller cages and I just make them spend the night in there. Basically like my blue cage that I showed you earlier. I will take that and I will just put them in there for the night and then I'll put them back in the big cage in the morning. And it's not like fully moving them down a step. It's just making them deal with each other in a smaller cage for 8 hours. And it works really well. I did it with my rats, Willow, Welsie, Merritt, Humdrum, and Mercy, because I got them into the big cage and they started fighting and moving them down. They were fine. But I couldn't move them back up because they were fighting, and I just made them spend the night in a smaller cage. And when I put them in the big cage the next day, they were absolutely fine. I did this with my old group of 7 that was a mixed group. It was Ducky, Dorothy, Fitz, Ezra, Lamb, Suitor, and Curtains. The kittens are going insane. And after Curtains and Suitor got spayed and I tried to put them back in, Ezra had decided he was the big man in charge and he didn't actually want them back in. So I made them spend 4 hours in a little cage together and then I popped them back in the big cage and he was a lot calmer. And he did once try to assert his dominance by power grooming Curtains, and she flipped him and pinned him so hard he stalled stars for a week, and then it was fine. And most recently, I did it with the group out there because I was having a lot of trouble because basically they were absolutely fine in the half critter nation. But when I tried to get them into the 2-story critter nation, Suitor was attacking them. She was angry. She was attacking them constantly. So I just put them in the little blue cage for the night. And when I put them back in the big cage, she was fine. And I haven't had an issue with her since, knock on wood. It's been a couple of weeks, but I don't trust her. So if you get stuck trying to get them into the big cage, sometimes just moving them into a really tiny cage works really well for like 8 hours or so. Sometimes that works really, really well. It's a trick I've used for years. And then finally, let's talk spaying and neutering. So the thing with rats is sometimes their issues are hormonal and you need to spay or neuter them in order to bring those hormones down so that they can live harmoniously with other rats. And it's not always going to be an option because it's an expensive surgery, and in the States it's just getting more and more expensive as things progress with our country. Sometimes it's the only option. A lot of times it is the last resort because it can be so expensive. But in general, if you can spay or neuter, if you then wait 2 to 4 weeks for female rats and 6 to 8 weeks with male rats, their hormones will calm down and it usually fixes the problem. So of my current rats that I've had to get spayed, it was Thistle and Kelpie, and it worked really well, especially with Kelpie. Kelpie has not had a single issue since then. And then Irving and Blooper, it also worked really, really well in calming them down. Blooper is like I wouldn't say a completely different rat because she's still insane, but her insanity is more just from her energy rather than her stress over the other rats. So that is an option if you can do it. I do recommend it if you're having a particular issue with a single rat. So yeah, that's it for this video. I hope some of this could be helpful to you guys. And I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, you know what to do. All the fun stuff down below. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.